AEW President Tony Khan announces on Dynamite last night that the AEW World Championship and the AEW World Trios Championships have been vacated. There was no mention of CM Punk or the Elite during the show, and we have news on the Elite side of the massive brawl that took place after the media scrum at All Out. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well, and as always, especially at the moment with AEW, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. And we knew going into last night's episode of Dynamite on TBS that we were going to have this big announcements about the future of the AEW World Championship, about the future of the AEW World Trios Championships. We knew they were going to be addressed on the show. We didn't know if we were going to get some kind of update as to if there was going to be interim champions, title vacations, what was going on, and it has been officially announced and confirmed by the president himself, and I think this was the right way to do it. AEW President Tony Khan opened last night's broadcast of Dynamite on TBS and did indeed reveal that the AEW World Championship and the AEW World Trios Championship have been vacated. Now, after this backstage fight following the all-out post-show media scrum, AEW CEO and President Tony Khan revealed the fate of the titles during a pre-recorded comment shown at the top of Wednesday night's Dynamite broadcast on TBS. This is what he had to say, quotes, "Following All Out on pay-per-view this past Sunday night, I've been forced to vacate the AEW World Championship as well as the AEW World Trios Championships." Now, Khan made no mention of the altercation after All Out involving CM Punk, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks and others. He said, quote, "The AEW World Championship is the single most prized title in all of combat sports. The next holder of the AEW World Championship will be decided in a tournament of champions scheduled to take place over the next couple of weeks, with the final being held in 2 weeks on the Dynamite Grand Slam special at Arthur Ashe Stadium." Now, the tournament began last night on Dynamite when former world champion Hangman Adam Page, who again has been involved in all of this, he wasn't involved in the incident on Sunday, but he's been involved in a lot of the friction, and of course CM Punk called Hangman out by name and several other names during the media scrum on Sunday. Hangman Page faced a founding member of the Blackpool Combat Club, the American Dragon Bryan Danielson. The winner of the match will move on to face the inaugural AEW World Champion Chris Jericho next week. On Friday's episode of AEW Rampage on TNT, former TNT champions will collide as three-time former TNT champion Sammy Guevara takes on the longest reigning TNT champion in AEW history, that being Darby Allin. Now, the winner of that match will move on to face former two-time AEW World Champion Jon Moxley on next Wednesday's edition of Dynamite, and the vacant AEW World Trios Championships was on the line at the beginning of the broadcast on Dynamite on Wednesday, where Death Triangle faced off against the Best Friends to determine the next champions. We'll talk about that in a separate video. I want to focus more on, again, this AEW World Championship, Trios Championship, CM Punk Elite situation, and the latest details that we have. So that was what Tony Khan did. That was the decision that Tony Khan made, was to vacate both sets of championships. As I mentioned, neither were mentioned during the show. We'll get some more details on that in just a second. But this is something that I did sort of recommend, that I thought he should do, and frankly, if he hadn't have done this, I've said in a lot of different videos recently, we've done a lot of videos covering this. I hope you've enjoyed the coverage. We will continue to provide the coverage, and any details that we get or any reports that are out there, we'll talk about them here on the channel. We'll get opinions in. That's what it's all about here on the channel. It's about discussing these big stories and providing you with the news and giving some opinion at the same time as well. I think this is what Tony Khan had to do. I think this was the right forum for him to do it in. I did mention that I didn't think it was right for him to go out there in front of the live audience with a live microphone, because we know how badly that's looked for him in the past, him wide-eyed looking at the audience. I think this was the best thing for him to do. Now, I have seen some people say, well, why didn't he give any explanation as to why he was stripping those of their championships? Why didn't he mention that CM Punk was vacating the AEW World Championship? Why didn't he say that Punk's injured because he requires surgery, he can't wrestle for a long time? Why didn't he mention that Punk's suspended? Why did he not mention that the Elites were suspended? Why did he not mention the incident that happened at the media scrum and after the media scrum? Why didn't he mention any of it? And there's one word why: legal. The legal reasons as to why he can't mention it. And because frankly, and we're going to talk about this in just a few minutes or so, because we still don't really know the full details as to what actually happened. What we do know, of course, is that CM Punk was massively unprofessional in the words that he was using and what he said at that all-out media scrum. We know there was an altercation. These are things that we know. We know there was an altercation in CM Punk's dressing room after the media scrum. We know it involved CM Punk. We know it involved Ace Steel. We know it involved Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. We also know it involved several other producers such as Christopher Daniels, Michael Nakazawa, Pat Buck was there as well, Brandon Cutler. We know it involved all of them. That's what we know. Now, the finer details, which are the key details involved in all of this, we don't know. We don't know if CM Punk threw the first punch. We don't know if Matt Jackson threw the first punch. We don't know if CM Punk didn't open up the door to his locker room. We don't know if the Young Bucks kicked it down and Kenny Omega kicked it down. We don't know if Kenny Omega really didn't get involved. We know that Ace Steel pulled Kenny Omega's hair and Kenny Omega was bitten, allegedly, by Ace Steel. We know that. But the finer details, which are the critical details involved in all of this, i.e. who started it, who didn't start it, who was the aggressor in the situation, in this physical altercation, we don't know. And from a legal perspective and the ramifications and the discipline that AEW is going to hand out, the sanctions that they're going to have to hand out in the future, they have to be really, really careful. They have to get all of these facts in order first before they decide where to go. That's ultimately why there is this external third party investigating what actually happened. Now, I did see some people say, because of course AEW's chief legal officer, Mega, I forget her last name, was present at the time in that this brawl happened. And some people said, well, how could she... Well, why was she present? It's a private locker room. Why did she just happen to be present? Either they were brawling in the hallway, or most likely the Elite, Omega and the Bucks, took her with them to use as a witness. They were going to confront him, but they wanted to have some person from the office as a witness, like a HR witness, to see what was going to happen. So clearly she must know really what happened, and that's why they've decided to suspend everyone involved until they understand what's going on better. So I think in the way they handled it on Dynamite was probably the best and only way that they could probably handle this. Honestly, I think that clearly it still looks bad and it still looks really unprofessional. And I know those people would say, if you're a casual fan and you haven't heard or you didn't know what was going on with CM Punk and the Elite right now, what must you think? But I feel like at this point, that's probably, especially with AEW, if this was WWE, you could argue that's a little bit different. WWE's got more casual fans than AEW. AEW's got a very hardcore fan base. You know, they get about 1 million, just over, watching Dynamite every single week. But they've got a smart, hardcore fan base. I would argue that 90 to 95% of people watching Dynamite on Wednesday knew exactly what the situation was with CM Punk, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks. I would argue that completely. So the idea that there might have been some people watching at home going, What's going on? I don't know what's going on. What? Vacating the championships? Why? I watched them win them at the weekend. What's going on there? I don't truly buy into that. And again, I think this was the best thing that Tony Khan could do. What does it mean for the future of them? Well, this is again where it gets quite interesting, because as I mentioned, everyone involved was not mentioned at all. And in fact, especially in the case of CM Punk, they were actually removed from certain aspects of AEW Dynamite last night. All traces of CM Punk, Kenny Omega, and the Young Bucks were removed from AEW's broadcast of Dynamite on Wednesday night. Now, for starters, this includes in the intro package that airs before the show, it no longer featured any of the 4 wrestlers. Instead, the likes of AEW Women's World or Interim Women's World Champion Toni Storm, Daniel Garcia, and TNT Champion Wardlow were prominently featured in the opening video package for the show. Furthermore, the announcers during the broadcast did not make any mention of CM Punk or the Elite during the 2-hour broadcast. In fact, as I mentioned, AEW President Tony Khan announced the fate of the AEW World title and World Trios title through this pre-recorded video. However, he didn't explain the reason why it happened, and he did not mention any of the previous champions by name. Similarly, Taz, Excalibur, Tony Schiavone on commentary made no reference to CM Punk or the Elite winning the titles last Sunday in their respective matches. Now, again, this didn't even just sit on just the broadcasters or Tony Khan, because we saw segments during the show, including an in-ring promo segment featuring the returning MJF and Jon Moxley, During that segment, neither wrestler made any mention of CM Punk while declaring their intentions of pursuing the AEW World Championship. Again, according to several reports, Punk, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Ace Steel, Michael Nakazawa, Brandon Cutler, and Pat Buck have all been suspended for a backstage altercation that occurred following Sunday's All Out pay-per-view. In addition to Punk being suspended and having the title vacated, CM Punk reportedly suffered a serious injury during his match against Jon Moxley. Whilst this is not confirmed by AEW or CM Punk, it's believed that he might have suffered a torn pec or a torn triceps or a torn biceps, something like that on Sunday, and he is going to be out anyway for this foreseeable future, irrespective of his employment status with the company. And again, a lot of people will say, why didn't they mention any of it during the broadcast? And the answer is the same. Legal reasons. They cannot, because they need to be very, very, very careful what they say and what they do. They don't want to be promoting someone that may no longer be with the company. They don't want to be doing that, because whilst everyone is suspended right now, there is a chance that a lot of people still could be fired. Now, I think CM Punk clearly is the most likely person to be exiting the company at this point, along with Ace Steel. And by all accounts, CM Punk had a meeting with Tony Khan on Tuesday to figure out what his AEW future looked like, what his exit from the company could look like, what his exit from storylines could look like as well. And I would assume, again, from a legal perspective, they have probably been instructed by the legal people within All Elite Wrestling and the legal people within Warner Media Discovery too of don't say anything. Don't say anything, don't do anything until we know where we stand from a legal perspective, and then maybe we can talk about some stuff. But right now isn't the time. And you know it's serious when it's one thing for the announcers or it's one thing for Tony Khan not to make reference to it. It's another thing for the announcers not to make reference for it, because that means they have been told, do not say CM Punk, do not say Kenny Omega, do not say the Young Bucks, do not say anything. Do not say anything about it. It's off record. Do not say anything about it. That's one thing. That's an instruction from above. But for also, to people like MJF, to people like Jon Moxley, for everyone involved last night to be told, you cannot talk about it live on television. And remember as well, AEW, they don't have scripts. They can have bullet points for promos, but they're given the freedom, really, to go out there with a microphone and say, to an extent, what they want. They can do their own creative when it comes to their promos. They have been told, say what you want, but don't say anything about CM Punk. Don't say anything about Kenny Omega. Don't say anything about the Young Bucks. Don't say anything about what happened at All Out in the media scrum or afterwards. Don't say anything, because it could land us in a lot of legal hot water. And frankly, we're still not totally sure what the outcome's going to be in this, and we're still not sure really what's going to be going on. We're still trying to figure it all out. And the reason they're trying to figure it all out is because, as I mentioned at the top of the video, they still don't know the full story. They know the general details, they know the broad strokes as to what happened. We know an incident took place, and we know that there's a lot of heat, and we know that Nick Jackson has a black eye, but some of the details we still don't know. And this is, again, where it gets really interesting, because now we have a report that kind of gives the elite side of the story, or Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks side of the story, to this incident as to what actually happened inside the dressing room for this big backstage brawl. We've heard the CM Punk, Ace Steel side of things. We spoke about it last night, talking about how the Young Bucks kicked the door down and CM Punk didn't want to talk to him, but they kicked the door down, and it was Matt Jackson who was the aggressor, which led to CM Punk being in there. And we know that Ace Steel's wife was in there as well, and that's why Ace Steel went crazy. We've heard that side of things. Now we've heard the account from the other side. And again, you have to note here that this is just one side of the story, and as is always the case with any kind of incident or just life, you have two sides of the story. Where does the truth lie? Somewhere usually in between, and that's probably the case here. But according to Sean Rossap of Fightful Select, we now have the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega side of the story when it comes to the incident in Chicago on Sunday. Now, sources close to the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega side of things, and maybe it doesn't come straight from the Bucks or Omega, it could possibly, but this is sources close to them, say that the Young Bucks went to talk to CM Punk as he'd outlined they should do if they had a problem. Now, Punk did say that in the press conference. He said, I'll walk up and down the hallways, and if anybody has a problem, say it effing to me, let's effing go. Now, the claim was that they opened the door, not kicking it in, as is claimed by the other side, and before Matt Jackson could say anything, Punk had went off and started throwing sucker punches at Matt's head. Again, that's a stark contrast to the other side of the story that says the Bucks kicked the door down and Matt Jackson was the one throwing the first punch. According to the elite side of thing, they opened the door, CM Punk went crazy and started throwing sucker punches at Matt Jackson. Now, Nick then went to intervene on his brother's behalf, and Ace Steel then allegedly threw a chair and hit Nick in the face. Which, again, we do know that Ace Steel threw a chair at Nick Jackson. We know that Nick Jackson has a black eye, but according to the Elite side of things, the reason why Nick even got involved was because of CM Punk attempting to punch his brother. Now, a lot of people have spoken about Kenny Omega's involvement. Now, it has been kind of said by quite a few different parties that Omega initially was fairly relaxed and cool about the situation, but again, it escalated into Omega's hair being pulled and being bitten by Ace Steel. According to the Elite side of things, the Kenny Omega involvement was said to be him trying to remove Larry, who is CM Punk's dog. We did see Larry actually at All Out before the show, managed to run out to the crowd and all this kind of stuff. And by all account, Kenny Omega's involvement was said to be attempting to remove Larry, CM Punk's dog, from the situation to help keep him safe because he was barking and going crazy, as a dog would. Because I think Larry's also a rescue dog. I've seen CM Punk do a video about Larry being a rescue dog, but you even saw him when he was out in front of that crowd in Chicago. He was kind of going a bit crazy, and from a dog's perspective, and you should always consider a dog's perspective, from a dog's perspective, if your owner is getting involved in a fight with another person, the dog's going to go crazy and start barking. That is what happens. As a dog owner myself, I can tell you that's what happened. So the dog is going crazy, so Kenny Omega attempted to remove Larry from the situation. Now, their side of the story says that once he handed Larry off, he tried to get Ace Steel off of Nick Jackson, and Ace Steel bit Omega and pulled his hair. So from the Elite side of things, Omega really wasn't being aggressive at all and wasn't an aggressor in the situation. He took a dog. This is what's crazy about all this. He took a dog out of the room, handed him off, attempted to try and separate Ace Steel from Nick Jackson, then he got his hair pulled and some part of his body bitten because of it. Now, perhaps the only lighthearted aspect of what Fightful have heard and is reporting, that when someone joked he got bit and someone assumed that Larry the dog bit Omega, only to learn it was actually allegedly Ace Steel. So afterwards, Kenny Omega said, "Oh, I got bitten." They went, "Oh, Larry, yeah, he bites." But no, Ace Steel bit me. Which again is laughable, but this whole situation is laughable, to be honest. Now, they've heard all sides continued shouting with allegations of legal threats from CM Punk's side, which again is very, very key, I think, to what Tony Khan and AEW have decided to do right now, or are deciding to do right now. Let's come back to that bit in a second. Again, this is one side of the confrontation, and categorically, and this is the real disparity in it, it is so different to the other side. You've got one side saying one thing, and the other side saying the other, and they're not even close. They're not even close to having points of reference where you go, okay, that's similar, that's similar, that's similar. They are way, way, way off. It's way off in comparison to Punk and Steel and those close to them. Now, the key thing, as I mentioned there, is that if this report is accurate from the Young Bucks side of things, after they had the scrap, after they had the fight, CM Punk was throwing allegations of legal threats against them. And if that is the case, that would make a lot of sense to why we saw what we saw last night, i.e., AEW saying nothing, being very, very, very cautious about what they say, what they don't say, and what they do, because they realize they are being scrutinized right now. They are under a microscope, not from the audience, but from a very wide set of lawyers as well, because there could be several lawyers in Chicago taking a look at exactly what AEW is doing right now and exactly what they are saying, because we know CM Punk had this meeting with Tony Khan on Tuesday, and we don't know what he said in it. Did he say, well, if you fire me, you're going to be hearing from my lawyers? Or if you keep these guys, you're going to be hearing from my lawyers? Or if we can't resolve this, you're going to be hearing from my lawyers? You know, yes, I'm hurt. Yes, I need surgery. Vacate the championship. But I've got a contract. And it's good, and I know I've got money in a contract, and I can sue you, not just for my money on my contract, but for unfair dismissal, for also a dangerous work environment, an unsafe work environment. There are several different avenues where this could go, and this could get even more messy than it already is. And it's already a very, very, very messy situation right now. So when it pertains to what happened last night on Dynamite, I think it's the right call, clearly, by Tony Khan. I think they addressed it in the best way, or really the only way they can, but it doesn't erase what happened and what is continuing to happen in AEW. I did think the show was good last night, but there is a huge cloud still hanging over AEW, and as I've said several times, I still don't know how they resolve all of this. Honestly, I don't know how they resolve it without at least one person going from the company. But if one goes, does the rest of them have to go as well? It's a chaotic and crazy situation that is going to continue to rumble on. So once we get more details, as always, guys, we'll talk about it here on the channel. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe. Bottom right-hand corner. This isn't the last time we're going to talk about this, so I'll speak for you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.